Hello to you all beautiful freedom fighters, welcome back to the channel and the latest update, this time from England, the United Kingdom. Following the general election that we had last week in the UK, we've had a lot of controversies. A number of Islamist candidates won the elections and they became MPs in the House of Commons, and over the last couple of days they've been sworn in as MPs to show their allegiance to the Crown and our Constitution, and of course a huge number of them did it in protest. But actually this is about how some of those MPs won their elections. Seems like a number of them had people around them and their supporters and their activists who may have been Islamists. Surprise, surprise, may have been actually pro-treasonous, treacherous people, of course. And this video we're going to talk about one.
On July 10th, 2024, the UK government confirmed the arrest and charging of Majid Nosaka, also known as Majid Freeman, a known Islamist activist. He has been accused of encouraging terrorism and supporting a proscribed organisation. This development has garnered significant attention and raises questions about freedom of speech, political activism, and the boundaries of lawful dissent. Majid Freeman has been an active voice in the pro-Palestinian movement within the UK. He is well known for his vocal criticisms of Israeli policies and his support for Palestinian rights. His activism includes social media campaigns and public confrontations with political figures such as Jonathan Ashworth, the former Labour MP for Leicester South.
Right, so it has taken Keir Starmer mere days into his governance of the country to once more remind Muslim voters that if they took their vote elsewhere from Labour this time, whether by voting for another party or not voting at all, apathy, certainly the biggest of the general election winners as it was, then they were right to do so. Twice, you see, in the space of a little over a minute, Keir Starmer managed to vindicate such thinking when asked about the Muslim votes Labour has lost and how he would address that going forwards, and instead he chose to brag about the massive mandate he's been handed by the country. Now, I'd argue he certainly has a massive majority, but the results definitely question the kind of mandate he has there, what right he has to rule, what endorsement by the country, by voters, he has actually been given to do so, versus a bent electoral system that just happens to favour two parties over all the others, his being one of them. Just because you can form a government doesn't mean to say voters gave you their assent to do that, though to listen to Starmer brag about it, you would certainly think otherwise, and those who didn't vote for him, well, they don't seem to matter very much at all.
Prime Minister, you secured a significant landslide at the general election, but in areas where there's a high Muslim population, Labour either lost seats or had their vote share slash. Do you accept that there's a problem with the relationship between the Labour Party and British Muslims at the moment?
Well, the first thing I'd say is this, that very many people voted Labour in that general election who've never voted Labour before. So we now hold seats in parts of the country that have never had a Labour MP. So this is an incredibly strong mandate. Of course, wherever we weren't able to secure votes, I'm concerned about that. But this is a clear mandate for change, for renewal, for a different way of doing politics and a return of politics to service. The days of self-entitlement and self-interest are over. And I'm really pleased to put a strong team on the pitch to start our work and to be completing here in Wales my visits to Scotland, to Northern Ireland and Wales, which is about
what about the issue with
relationship.
British Muslims? Trust has clearly broken down there. The election results show that. What are you going to do to try and rebuild it?
Well, we've got a strong mandate. Of course, where we didn't secure the votes, we'll address that. But I don't think there's any disputing the strength of the mandate that we have, and that it's a mandate for change, for renewal, and for politics as public service.
Right, so that was Keir Starmer being interviewed by ITV's political correspondent Shiab Khan, and basically saying, look at my big fat mandate. Not once, but twice. Given Starmer was being asked about lost Muslim votes, though, the conclusion you draw from that is that he frankly does not care. Making it worse for me was that in light of Starmer and the hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party he presides over, the offence caused to Muslim voters, Muslim communities over his ongoing stance regarding Israel and Gaza, and notably his most recent comments whilst on the election trail complaining that people from Bangladesh were not being sent home, majority of Bengalis being Muslim as they are, it didn't escape my notice that Shiab Khan, interviewing him, is himself a Muslim of Bengali heritage. Starmer was literally looking him in the eye and ignoring both times the issue of the Muslim vote being put to him by a Muslim voter, in fact, and how much of it he had lost because he had this big mandate now to run the country. Frankly, it's a testament to Khan's professionalism, in my view, on one hand, but Starmer's indifference on the other. And so although he says he needs to address those issues of people who did not vote Labour, those reasons some people didn't vote for Labour whilst actively campaigning, he demonised and attacked many of them for the sake of winning votes of others who agreed with such sentiment. He sought the Tory hard-right vote and he didn't get it. I don't believe he will change tack on that either, but it's something I would be very happy to be proven wrong on. On the matter of mandates, though, the dictionary definition of that term mandate happens to be the authority to carry out a policy regarded as given by the electorate to a party or candidate that wins an election. So a mandate is an assent to carry out politics you stood on a platform of, authority given by the electorate. It's one way you can view that as a national collective, but also each individual MP has their own individual mandates. So no arguing that Starmer has a mandate to carry out policies within his manifesto then. Interestingly though, if it isn't in the manifesto, according to that definition he doesn't have a mandate to do it, in which case. But all governments do stuff like that, don't they? But the scale of the mandate is what Starmer bleated on about. That isn't counted in number of seats. That has a bearing on how easily he can get stuff passed, but has no bearing on what he has authority by the voting public to actually carry out. Now the tricky line in that definition is authority as regarded as given by the electorate.
During the recent election campaign, Freeman confronted Ashworth over his stance on the Gaza conflict. Freeman accused Ashworth of having the blood of Palestinian men, women and children on his hands due to his political positions. This confrontation was captured on video and shared widely on social media. In the video, Freeman can be heard repeatedly asking Ashworth if he condemns Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ashworth's refusal to provide a clear answer led to heated exchanges, with Freeman asserting his right to question the Labour candidate. Ashworth, in turn, accused Freeman and his supporters of bullying.
That then falls on our electoral system as it currently is. But that is highly questionable as well, because if Starmer is measuring his mandate in terms of numbers of seats, which he clearly is there, then he owes that entirely to the electoral system and not any actual mandate voted for by the British public, which of course would be counted in literal number of votes, of which Starmer got nearly 540,000 fewer of than Labour got in 2019, which we were of course told was the worst election performance Labour had given since 1935, and over 3 million fewer votes than Labour got in 2017. In fact, Starmer only got 380,000 more votes than Ed Miliband got in 2015. Yet where Miliband lost 26 seats in 2015, Starmer instead gains a supermajority. So the electoral system itself didn't deliver Starmer a mandate. I could talk of the fact that in terms of vote share, Labour also only went up by 1.6%. Labour, broadly speaking, therefore lost votes and managed to just stand still, just to maintain its, broadly speaking, current amount of vote share, not really gain much at all. It is in power solely because other parties and their support, the Tories particularly, and their mandate to rule was stripped from them so heavily that actually has given Starmer a working majority to form a government. But as far as mandates go, he's got a weak one. According to Jeremy Corbyn, the weakest mandate in British political history, in fact. It is a large majority he has, but a low mandate. Corbyn said all of this speaking to the Democracy Now! YouTube channel interview he did with them. And the reason that mandate is so low is because, yes, Starmer gained votes in areas Labour traditionally hasn't won them, as he no doubt mentioned in that video he made a big thing of. But the party stood still broadly. The mandate is low because of the losses they had elsewhere in areas they already held the seats. Many formerly safe Labour seats from Bradford to Bethnal Green to Yardley to Ilford North to Birmingham Ladywood are now tight marginals for Labour, where it wouldn't take much of a shift for Labour to lose them next time around. And as we all know, that tends to be how things go for a party one parliamentary term into government. They don't tend to build on that. They always tend to lose ground to other parties in opposition. Even Starmer's own majority was cut by more than half, and he still managed to become Prime Minister. So come on, folks, look at it for what it really is. But it is the Muslim vote particularly that obviously Shihab Khan asked him on, and where Starmer has caused such pain, such offence, and resulted in such loss. But what is the scale of that particularly? How can we measure it as a demographic? Difficult to quantify, actually, when you look at it, given Muslim communities vary in size from very substantial to virtually non-existent around the country. But to get an idea of the scale of the losses Starmer's Labour has experienced in terms of a lost Muslim vote, that he can't even bring himself to speak about because he's still too giddy with the size of his parliamentary majority now. But fortunately, the analysis has been done by Hyphen, an online magazine focusing on pan-European Muslim issues, as this excerpt shows. There was a dramatic Labour collapse in the constituencies with the highest proportions of Muslims. My own research over the last 36 hours has found that in the 21 seats where more than 30% of the population is Muslim, Labour's share dropped by 29 percentage points, from an average 65% in 2019 to 36% in 2024. Turnout also fell more steeply than average, down 11.2 percentage points in these seats, suggesting that some disaffected Muslim electors abstained while others voted for other candidates. In these seats, the total number of Labour votes fell from more than 600,000 in 2019 to just under 300,000 in 2024. That is the equivalent of more than half the total national drop in the Labour vote between the two elections. Labour has lost 537,688 votes compared with 2019. Despite this voting slump, Labour remained the largest single party in the most Muslim parts of Britain, retaining 17 out of the 21 constituencies. The most effective electoral challenge came from locally sourced independent candidates rather than the Workers' Party of Britain or the Green Party, although both organisations achieved some impressive showings in individual constituencies. Independents were elected in Birmingham Perry Barr, Blackburn, Dewsbury and Batley and Leicester South. But they failed in Bradford West, despite that seat accounting for the largest single drop in the Labour vote share, 44.5 percentage points, because the remaining vote was divided. Similarly, Labour clung on in Birmingham Ladywood following a fight back by the incumbent and new Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, as well as some candidate controversies. Among the defeated Labour candidates was Khalid Mahmood in Birmingham Perry Barr, who had been the sole English Muslim MP at the time of the Iraq War in 2003. There were heavy swings against other Labour MPs too, though those who would quit the front bench over the party's position.
The election results were a significant blow to Labour in constituencies with high proportions of Muslim voters. Jonathan Ashworth lost his Leicester South seat to Showkat Adam, a pro-Palestinian independent candidate. Adam's victory was celebrated by Freeman, who had actively campaigned against Ashworth. However, Adam's campaign clarified that Freeman was not officially part of their team and condemned terrorism unequivocally. Following these events, the police executed a warrant at Freeman's address in Leicester. He was subsequently charged with encouragement of terrorism and supporting a proscribed organisation. These charges are serious and carry significant legal consequences.
The party's position on Gaza, such as Jess Phillips and Imran Hussein, tended to experience smaller vote drops than others. In London's East End, left-wing Afsana Begum saw her vote share fall by much less, 17.3 percentage points in Poplar and Limehouse, than her more leadership-friendly neighbour Rushanara Ali in Bethnal Green and Stepney, 39.4 percentage points. The loss of Muslim votes was also a problem for Labour in some seats with smaller Muslim communities. In the 43 next most Muslim constituencies, between 15% and 30% of the population, Labour lost another 300,000 votes. That means the equivalent of the entire national drop in Labour's votes since 2019 happened in these 64 most Muslim seats. Starmer still cannot bring himself to acknowledge Muslim vote losses, acknowledge that that is a failing he in no small part is directly responsible for, and the scale of it is a difference maker. What that analysis shows is if certain constituencies could get their acts together, many of these seats had almost fell due to the loss of the Muslim vote this time round, though not exclusively, obviously. The rest of the article, hyphen article, very much does point this out. But in those seats with the largest Muslim communities, the biggest scale of potential future upset is there. And if I were an MP in one of those seats, for sure, you're safe for the next 5 years. Become the next election, if a concerted effort to fix relations with Muslim voters starting now isn't begun, isn't taken seriously, if Labour's hierarchy of racism still makes it offensively apparent, then independent candidates notably, but alternative parties certainly, have a real chance of taking those seats or taking those seats back for their communities and carrying forward mandates of their own. Some independents were of course successful in these areas, as that hyphen excerpt pointed out, a new Gaza bloc of MPs as they've been nicknamed, ready to give Starmer a hard time, not just over Gaza, but on Muslim issues too, going forwards. And I look forward to seeing what they do and what they say in Starmer's new government. Check this video recommendation out to find out a little bit more about them, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next feed. Cheers, folks.
Freeman has been released on bail and is scheduled to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on July the 24th, 2024. The specific details of the charges relate to his social media activity, where he allegedly posted content that encouraged terrorism and supported banned groups. The arrest and charges against Freeman have sparked a debate on various fronts.
The constituency that became the hot debate, Jonathan Ashworth, shadow cabinet member, part of the Labour Party. He was supposed to win. He was supposed to be currently in Keir Starmer's cabinet. He lost the seat, and this man has now been arrested. The pro-Gaza Majid Freeman, a supporter of Shokat Adam, is due to appear at the Westminster Magistrates Court on the 24th of July following his arrest, and is being charged, of course, when it comes to the counter-terrorism police did their investigation, and they went after him, and they discovered he was around Shokat Adam, who is currently a new MP in Parliament for Leicester South. Now, Shokat Adam himself and his supporters, of course, as you can see in the background behind him with the balloons, we got the usual colors, red, green and black and white, which is, of course, the Palestinian flag, and generally speaking, all the other Arab countries as well. And these guys, a number of these candidates, when they won, either as an independent or part of other parties like the Greens or the Workers' Party, which is George Galloway, these guys decided to use their victory speeches to not talk about the UK, not talk about Leicester South, for example, but talk about Gaza. And this was already the alarm bells started then, and a lot of people in the establishment decided to keep an eye on a lot of these people. And of course, as I said, that guy Majid has now been arrested and is going to be in court on the 24th of July, 2 weeks from now. This was, Leicester South was, of course, as I said, Jonathan Ashworth's constituency until now, and he's one of the, what we call the liberal Labourites, who basically wanted to help Keir Starmer to reform the Labour Party to ensure that the Islamists have been kicked out and the anti-Semites, but what they actually ended up doing is that they might have pushed them out, but the people who've been pushed out by the Labour Party have now defeated the Labour Party in those exact same constituencies. So these are the problems that the Liberal side in this country have created for decades and decades, and now it's backfiring on their own parties and their own establishment. The Liberals are not laughing now, are they? Now, Jonathan Ashworth told The Telegraph that Shokat Adam, Mr. Adam Patel, has serious questions to answer about his association with this individual, Majid, who's been arrested. Decent-minded people across Leicester will expect their new MP to publicly, of course, provide a full account of his dealings and his connection with this person during the election campaign. Lord Wolney also, who used to be part of the Labour Party, said the government's anti-Semitism, who's the government's anti-Semitism czar, has described the news as disturbing. But again, let's not forget that it was people like Lord Wolney and Ashworth and all the others over the last few years who allowed this to happen by promoting mass migration and multiculturalism. Now it is backfiring on them. We had this statement from the police, of course, in Leicestershire, saying this morning on the 9th of July, this was yesterday on Tuesday, officers executed a pre-planned warrant at an address in Cecil Road, Leicester. A 36-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of counter-terrorism offences, including encouraging acts of terrorism, so getting others to get involved as well. The man currently remains in police custody and the investigation remains ongoing. We then had Jonathan Ashworth responding to the police, saying this is deeply disturbing and alarming. It said that this individual is a key campaigner for Leicester South's new MP, Shokat Adam Patel. Shokat Adam must now condemn this individual and condemn those organising demonstrations defending him. The safety of people must always come first. This is the other problem that we're currently having, because when we arrest these people, you still then have the other chunk of people in the community coming out to protest against their arrest. So technically speaking, they're also aiding and encouraging bad behavior. A lot of those people are the same people who've been helping these individuals like Majid Freeman before his arrest. So anyone who goes to these protests...
Supporters of Freeman argue that his arrest is an infringement on his right to free speech and political activism. They claim that his criticism of Israeli policies and his support for Palestinian rights should not be criminalised. On the other hand, proponents of the government's actions argue that there is a clear line between lawful dissent and incitement to terrorism. They maintain that encouraging violence or supporting proscribed organisations cannot be tolerated under any circumstances.
Outside the police stations or outside the courts must be watched by the authorities, because I can assure you a number of them will be on their watch lists already. But will the establishment do anything about it? Not sure. Considering that over the last day or two, we've been reporting, confirmed by the Labour government, that our prison system is at full capacity. We don't have enough space. Unless you are arresting Tommy Robinson, then there is always space for Tommy Robinson, but the others are going to be released early. What's going to happen to this man, Majid Freeman? Are we going to find some space for him now? Are we going to release more people who are part of grooming gangs in order to give space to him? But that means you're going to have to bring out more criminals in order to just replace him with another criminals. So someone in the Embara says Majid Freeman was apparently one of the key instigators of the attacks on Hindus in 2022. So I wouldn't be surprised. We don't have the confirmation, but I wouldn't be surprised. If you remember a couple of years ago, as we reported on this channel as well, and the mainstream media, some of them reported it, Leicester primarily, and also it led to Birmingham as well, had a massive multicultural fights on the streets between the Hindus and the Pakistanis, the Islamic side, and the whole thing kicked off. And we still didn't really get any acknowledgement from the establishment, from the grown-ups in the room, whether it was the Tories or the Labour Party, who claimed to be, centre ground, that really believe in national security and all that nonsense. None of them did anything about it. But of course, we are where we are now, and let's see if we have any reaction following this. Apart from Jonathan Ashworth, who's no longer in Parliament, we haven't heard any official statements from the party leaders on this story, which is not really a surprise anymore, but we'll find out. Richard says the Islamists being released early so that there is more room for British patriots. Michael Moore says deport all radical Islamic extremists. Letting out grooming gangs, is ridiculous and an insult to the victims. Absolutely spot on, Michael Moore. It says arrest and deport. How are we going to do that while we are still part of ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, and of course having the European judges having supremacy over our own country? Earthstick says, it's obvious what has happened here. Labour made a deal with the Islamic voters to let out some of the criminals if they vote Labour. But that didn't work because they didn't vote for them. That was the whole point. And that's why the Labour Party's performance was so low this time round. Because they lost the white working classes, but now they also lost the Islamic votes, especially the extreme ones, to the Green Party, the Workers' Party, and the Independents. So if there were any sort of deal, of course, this is just a conspiracy theory because we don't have any evidence or paperwork to prove that. Even if there were a deal, that deal has now been broken by the Islamic side. So why would they do this? AFC Man UK says, all these Islamist MPs in the House of Commons, can they even eat prawn sandwiches? Aren't they haram? They're not going to eat prawn sandwiches. Prawn sandwiches? What? I thought you said in my head, I read prawn. I heard bacon for some reason. I think they'll be fine with prawn. Can't believe how Trotskyites are always sounding the alarm about their far-right extremism and hammering reform. Look at the right-wing thugs and terrorist supporters at the same time are roaming the streets unchallenged. They will find out when they come for them one day. We have a troll in the live chat. Borat says, you look like a Parky. Well done. I'm so proud of you. So proud. So Stunning and brave. Of course, all these leftists trolling. Ironically, they end up being the racists themselves, which is always funny, by the way. Let's get to the next comment. Shlomi says, Islamists are taking over your country, and unfortunately, I don't see a way to stop them. For every baby born, they have 3. No, they have 7. That's the difference in terms of the ratio. So it's even worse than 3. Only a matter of time before they are the majority. So yeah, in terms of the actual rate, it's around 7. Obviously, when it comes to the white English middle class, that's now -1. But it's 0 at this point, which is not very good. Changes needed says, did you hear the news about our lovely Prime Minister in Canada and NATO? Even NATO does not want us.
The broader political impact of these events is also significant. The loss of Labour seats to pro-Palestinian independence signals a shift in voter sentiments, particularly in constituencies with large Muslim populations. This development may prompt political parties to re-evaluate their positions on Middle Eastern conflicts and their engagement with Muslim communities. Freeman's case also highlights the role of social media in modern political activism. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook have become crucial arenas for political discourse, but they also pose challenges for regulating content that might incite violence or support terrorism.
They would want the money from Canada, but not the decision-making coming from Justin Castro. The whole country is going down. All these Anglosphere countries is so bad. Freedom says Trump 2024. Trump is not going to be able to help the UK. Stephen says Labour didn't lose the white working class. They S on us and deserve everything they get that's coming to them. So by default, they lost the white working classes. Obviously, by betraying them, they've lost them. So that's the whole point, because a lot of them ended up voting for reform. And some still voted Tory, but not many of them, obviously. Not really sure why you would even bother voting Tory at this time. Frankie says, I'm glad you pointed it out, because if white supremacy exists, then it does in the left, as they hold the same prejudices against the Jews and also Hindus backing these brown out. Yeah, the hatred. So the problem we currently have is that the globalization of the world of the last century or so means, of course, multiculturalism has become the default anyway, but at least multi-ethnicity. But at the same time, the attacks are not just on the Jews, but also Christians. It's not necessarily the Christians directly in Europe, it's the Christian system, the Christian civilization in Western Europe, obviously, and as well as individual Christians. But let's not forget individual Hindus as well. And that's kind of underrated, but look at what's going on right now on the border between India and Pakistan. That continues to happen, and individuals continue to get targeted just because they're Hindu, and that is not fair on humanity. Garrett says, rumors are that Just Stop Oil and Youth Demand are joining forces with the Islamists to oust Starmer. The state opening a parliament is a target for terrorist attack by them. Of course, if any evidence comes out, hypothetically, if any attack is to occur or any attack is prevented, that still counts. Because, for example, today we had the French police in Paris arresting a suspect who was planning to target the Olympics in Paris. So that still counts as an attack. It's just been prevented. If any evidence comes out that any of these so-called credible organizations, credible as in they are kind of mainstream now, Just Stop Oil, Youth Demand and all the others, have been part of any sort of conversation with any crazy person, there has to be proper investigation, not just by the police and all that, but also media. But we don't really have any evidence right now anyway, but we do know that there have been an element of Trotskyites and, of course, the Leninists who have been in bed with the Islamists for way too long in the Western world, and of course across the world in general. Look what they did in Iran and other places. problem that could arise is people fleeing. They have to take the law into their hands from letting rapists out of jail and allowing Islamists to thrive. A country going down fast. This is why you need the actual state themselves, and that includes the crown, to actually get their act together and defend the country. We can have our differences, political differences with King Charles on eco stuff and everything else, and globalization. That's one thing, that's politics. But their other role is to protect the system and the land and the nation. And I would require the crown to do something. We do not have a symbolic monarchy in this country. It's part of the constitution. The crown has a role. The crown is above party politics, but it's there to protect national security. What are we doing? And it's not really Charles. With all the respect, Elizabeth II, the role changed under her because the politicians of the day, they became the fathers of the country. Winston Churchill was at that point essentially more like a president. So when Elizabeth was young, people like Churchill and around Elizabeth, they said, as long as you keep the country stable, you've done a good job, we'll take care of the rest. And that's what happened. Now, we do not require the crown, king or queen, to get involved in politics. Absolutely not. Because that's not democratic. But they must be involved with the state properly. I know obviously they are. They get the briefings from MI5, from MI6. They still have a role, but they might, at times, when it's required, when there's an emergency, I would like to hear from the crown, not from the prime minister. I would like to hear from the king, regardless of political differences. Firstly, he needs to calm it down anyway. And he's done a little bit, obviously, since he's become king. But if we, for example, if France invades us tomorrow, I don't want to hear from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I would like to hear from King Charles. Constitutionally speaking, he's the head of state. That's just one example. When Parliament goes rogue, like between 2017 and 2019, when Parliament were trying to stop Brexit, it's the job of the Crown to interfere and tell them to shut up and do Brexit, because that's what people voted for, or at least not collaborate with the European forces against the sovereignty of this country. But of course that wasn't happening. At this point, how can we even defend constitutional monarchy if constitutional monarchy is not doing checks and balances? The whole point is checks and balances. Who's in charge of this country? Civil service.
As the legal proceedings against Freeman move forward, several key questions will be addressed. The court will examine the evidence against Freeman to determine whether his social media posts constitute encouragement of terrorism and support for a proscribed organisation. The case will test the balance between protecting freedom of speech and ensuring public safety. The outcome could set precedents for future cases involving political activism and terrorism charges. The broader political ramifications, particularly for the Labour Party and pro-Palestinian activists, will continue to unfold. The response from the public and political figures will shape future debates on these issues.
And those around civil service and the international bodies. It's not the king and it's not the prime minister either. That's why things are falling apart. Why should we expect somebody in Brussels to care about our well-being in the United Kingdom? The same thing is happening everywhere. If you're watching from Norway, if you're watching from Denmark, wherever you're watching this from. Canada has a deeper problem because on the one hand they're part of the Commonwealth, and technically speaking, King Charles is also the king there, but at the same time not. And the Prime Minister Trudeau is essentially Prime Minister and President at the same time, but not really constitutionally. And nobody knows who's in charge in Canada either, because it's not Justin. That's for sure. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a big break because we're going to have to now prepare for England to destroy the Dutch. I did see a good meme. Of course, it's the semi-finals of Euros. If you're going to be watching this, the match between England and the Netherlands, I did see a good meme about it saying the winner between England and Netherlands gets to keep South Africa. On that note, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Maya Tusi, And we are the media.
Public opinion on Freeman's arrest is divided. Some see it as a necessary step to prevent terrorism, while others view it as an overreach by the government to silence dissent. Media coverage has been extensive, reflecting the polarised views on the matter. Freeman's supporters emphasise his role as a political activist advocating for Palestinian rights. They argue that his confrontations with political figures and his social media activity are part of legitimate political expression. They also point out that Freeman has consistently condemned violence and called for peaceful solutions. Critics argue that Freeman's rhetoric crosses the line into incitement. They believe that his social media posts and public statements have the potential to inspire violence and support for terrorist organisations. They support the government's actions as necessary to maintain national security. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.